Hello everybody, welcome to the first August 2020 online workshop. Today is going to be another drawing workshop, and I'm going to show you, kind of follows on from what we did last time, and I'm going to show you, this is pretty much the method that I use when I'm doing an initial blocking for a painting. I would say a lot of the time, but the way I'm going to show you it today is as an exercise for training your ability to eyeball distances without measuring. But there will be a little bit of measuring as well, and I'll explain that to you as we go. Hopefully you can all see me and hear me okay. Hello Michelle, hello Heather, hello Lorraine, hello Alison. So please do leave me a little message in the chat. It looks like it's working okay to me, but leave me a little message in the chat to let me know if you can hear me and if you can see me. I've got my standard mic on today, and I have a new mic. A posh new mic today. So hopefully, at least while I'm over here, as long as it doesn't, the sound looks all right to me, as long as it doesn't overload it, hopefully the sound should be nice. Thank you, Renee. Great to hear. Okay, so I sent you, I put up for download an image that we're going to be working from today. And I made it so that you could print it out. This time I actually spent some time making sure I could figure out how to set the size of something that prints out. So it prints out 8 by 10 inches. But you can also do this from a screen. It's going to help you if you have your drawing and your reference side by side, and that's more difficult to do with the screen. So what I've got here is kind of the ideal way to set it up, which I'll take you through in a minute. But basically any other kind of method will work for this. It's not really strict. I tend to be, I mean, for me it's anything that works I will use. So I do use sight size, I do use some measuring and relational measuring, and probably what I use more than anything else is checking to see what lines up with what. But for distances, I generally go back to eyeballing as much as I can, which has come from really a lot of practice just trying to judge distances. Now the important bit with this is you need some kind of feedback mechanism. I think I talked about this last month, is that you need to immediately, if you can, check to see if your estimate is right. So the way I know in a lot of the ateliers, they actually, when they do measuring with bargs, when you do barg drawings, they actually have a piece of thread and they put it over the actual drawing, get the measurement and then transfer it. To me, I prefer to guess the distance first and then check it and make corrections, because I think that is much more likely, well, it is much more likely to develop your ability to judge distances by eye. So that's what this exercise is about. It's also going to be about simplifying form into a straight line blocking, okay? So, hello David, nice to see you. God, I can't believe it, I've got new kit out and it's all working. That never happens. So here I've got this on an easel, on a drawing board, and on the drawing board is a piece of craft card, which is just to give us, this is just a cut of MDF, an MDF board. It's a slightly more forgiving surface to draw on because it's slightly soft. So here is the image, which I've printed out. And next to it, for people who've done barging before, you'll be used to a setup like this. I've got a sheet of paper with a grid the same size. right next to it. So this is a very similar approach to what I was showing you last time when we were just doing a very small squares, but this is more difficult because we only have a vertical and a horizontal. That's great to hear. Hopefully the sound quality should be really good because I've got this posh new mic which cost an arm and a leg because my old one broke, so I thought I'll get a really good one. Hopefully it'll work out. So we only have a vertical and a horizontal here, and this is going to be sight size, so I'm going to be working exactly the same size, and I would advise you to do that with this exercise if you can. I've also got a sheet of tracing paper which isn't going to stay here, but I'll use this to mark on the points as I estimate them and then check them once I've got my highest, lowest, furthest left and furthest right. But some of them I'm just going to check as I go along with a ruler and see how well I've done. Okay. So, it'd help if I don't hit the mic with the paper. So this is just like a final check, but if you've got a ruler, piece of thread, anything, or even just, you can just do it with your pencil. The point is we're going to guess the distances first, mark them, and then we're going to check them against the drawing, okay? Let me switch over. Trying to remember, I've got two computers going. I'm trying to remember which one controls the cameras. Let me switch over onto the other camera. Okay, so now you can see a bit clearer what we're going to be working on. So do let me know if you're going to be drawing along with me. I'm using a charcoal pencil for this, but you can use anything. You can use biro if you want, although of course you can't rub it out. But the point of this isn't to make a beautiful work of art. The point of this is it's a practice exercise, and it's designed to stretch a particular ability so that we develop a more comprehensive mental map of judging distances in our heads, so that when we come to do a painting, firstly, even if we are measuring, we'll be able to see very quickly if something is off. And also we'll be able to eyeball much more accurately and just lay out a painting much more quickly. So I first learned the sight size method from the Barg book. Fantastic, people working along, great. Okay, sometimes it's better to watch, yeah, and then try the thing another time. Oh, broken printer, yeah. iPad should be fine, Marianne, iPad should be fine. Try to do your drawing exactly the same size as you see it on the screen of the iPad, and you can still check. Obviously you have to be careful not to touch the screen, but you can still check your measurements, so it should be fine. So the first thing you want is you want something the same size as your reference, and you want the horizontal and the vertical. So hopefully that was fairly obvious and you'll already have that in. Okay, so as I was saying, I first learnt sight size from the Barg book, from a description in there, and then an awful lot of trial and error, because obviously I haven't been to an atelier and learned. I think most ateliers kind of have different ways of doing it, but generally speaking, the version I learned is that you stand back, you hold up a thread, you measure, and then you walk forward and you make your mark. This is slightly different, except that we will be looking first for the highest point, the lowest point, the furthest left and the furthest right, and trying to line those up on these lines here. Now, you can work with this as much as you like, and you can also, once you've done an awful lot of this kind of thing, you can also drop the grid if you want to and imagine it after a while. You might see me, if I'm painting, you might see me kind of doing this a lot. And what I'm doing is I'm imagining a grid, a simple grid over the drawing, okay? So the first thing I want to do is to find the highest point. Now for this subject, the highest point is fairly easy. It's obviously here, and the reason it's easy is because it actually crosses the line. I mean, technically it's a little bit higher. You know, I'm not going for Barg kind of levels of absolute accuracy here, but I want it to be a reasonably accurate blocking. So the way I will do this, I'm going to switch back to the other camera a second just to show you. I'm going to be quite far back, so I'm going to look at it it's easier if you can do this from a distance. You can do it like, obviously you can be doing it here and that's fine. But personally, I find it works if you can get a little bit, just, it doesn't have to be a huge amount, but just far back enough so it's easier to judge. So I'm going to look at it and I'm looking at this distance, trying not to look at the subject at all and imagine it as an actual thing, just to look at this distance from here to here on that line, and then imagine it here, and then I'll walk over and make the mark, okay? It's about halfway up, it's probably slightly less than halfway up, and I'm going to guess that it's about there, okay? And that's all you need to do to get started. Let me show you the camera on the drawing so you can see the mark. Just made a mark there, okay? So stick your first mark in and that's your highest point. But that's a guess, right? Didn't measure it. Whereas sight size, usually you would stand back and measure it first, transfer it to the drawing. We're just eyeballing. It's a slightly different approach. And then I'm going to check. Now, depending on how accurate you want to be, you could use a ruler for this, but I'm going to check this distance from there to there. And the way I do it is I just use my thumbnail and the end of the pencil. And then transfer it over here and see if I was out or if I was right. And I was actually I was a bit too high. I was too high by about that much. So that should be a fairly accurate highest point. Now, just a quick word on why I approach it this way and why I think this is a good way to practice. Okay. It's that instant feedback that happens at that point when you guess it first and then you go and measure it and you see how well you've done. Over time, the reason that feedback is important is because it shows you where you're out. It shows you how you tend to over or underestimate distances. And over time, it will show you when you're getting closer. So gradually, bit by bit, you might be really out to start with, and then gradually, bit by bit, you'll find that you'll get closer. It's also very motivating when you can see that you're making progress, okay? So now I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. Now the lowest point of the drawing isn't actually there, it's here. So it's slightly below that. And you see that this is actually the lowest point of the subject, right? Is about this bit here. You could arguably say that it's the bottom of the cast shadow here, but for sake of argument, I'm going to go for the bottom of the garlic bulb there. So I want to imagine that going across here and where it cuts this line. So I want to imagine this distance and this distance. It can help to imagine them both. Visualize is a better word than imagine, isn't it, really? So I can see it's definitely more than halfway. And I'm going to guess it as being about there. This is like, it's pretty much the same approach, at least a very similar approach to when I'm painting. Spend ages at the beginning, working really slowly, and then it goes a lot quicker once you've got that down. You all right with that? So that's the highest and the lowest point. So the next thing, obviously, I'm going to do the same thing. I want to check it and see, you know, how out I am. You can, if you do a lot of this over a period of time, you know, like every day, just do a simple block-in, spend half an hour doing a block-in. Always have something set up ready to go. You find you can get really accurate really quite quickly. In a matter of, you know, a few weeks, you'll be eyeballing really accurately. So I'm just going to check that against this distance here, and I'm out by a tiny bit, about that much. So at the moment my margin for error is about 2 millimeters, probably, something like that. Yours may be different, may be better, may not be as close. It doesn't matter. The point is not where you are now. The point is that between now and a month's time you've made some progress and you've improved. I still make, by the way, absolute huge mistakes in laying out and drawing when I'm doing a painting, because I work very direct and I'm thinking about colour, values, everything at the same time. You know, I'm not very good at doing that, so I tend to quite often make some real hummers and have to fix them later, which is always really annoying. Well, good. If you end up with a few of these, sometimes you can end up with a few of these, you know. It can be a good idea to put a little mark next to which one is actually the accurate one. So instantly we've got a top and bottom. So the next thing I want is the furthest left. And that's going to be out to this point here. So I have to visualize the same way as we did here, you know, to visualize a horizontal across there. I have to visualize, thankfully it's very close, but I have to visualize a vertical going from there to there. This is like, Harold Speed calls this the scaffolding, I think, of the drawing. And I want this point here, I want this point, how far out it is, but on this line. So I'm going to do the same thing, stand back, look at it. And again, I would say it's probably about halfway across, a little bit more than halfway. And incidentally, another exercise I used to set myself an awful lot was to just draw a bunch of vertical and horizontal lines on a sheet of paper and then try and mark the exact middle of them and then go and check and see how I did. That's a good one as well. You know, try and find the middle by eye and then go and check it and see how you did. So take some time, you know, to look. Don't rush into it. You kind of need to be slowed down quite a bit for this to work as well. I think that's, looking at that, I think I've probably gone a bit too far. Probably gone a bit too far to the left. And I want to change it, but I won't. I'll check it and see. Okay, so that's the furthest left point, and then I'm going to check it. But the distance I need to check it against is imagining this, and you know, you can always draw on these if you want to, if you've got it like printed off, you know. I want that distance there. So let's see what I've got. I've got my thumbnail here up against my thumbnail lined up there, and then the end of the pencil lined up with the mark I made, and then I'll transfer it and check it. And I was way out, way out. I overdid it by about half a centimetre at least. So it's probably about there. So I'm going to just guess it again and then check it again. And this may seem tortuously slow, but this is the important bit. This guessing and then checking over and over again. It's still too far. Still a little bit too far, so it is actually about there. And then gradually, you know, move it down and get closer and closer. So for me, because I've done a lot of this kind of practice before, and also for, you know, for Sirka and Marilyn and anyone else who's done a lot of very accurate drawing, I don't know how you find it, but I find if I don't do this stuff like every now and again, reasonably regularly, the skill drops off. And this is fairly natural because unless you're continually pushing yourself, even if it's just a little bit, and continually trying to stretch your ability to carry out a particular skill well, it gradually will, over time, it will start to drop off a little bit. And for me, certainly mine has dropped off a little bit. So I need to be putting in a bit of time to bring it back. All okay? So that's furthest left and furthest right. So I think I've said this before as well. All learning is It's not just represented in your brain, it is actually physical changes in your brain, connections between neurons. And the more you use those connections, the stronger they get. They get the connections between neurons get coated in something called, what's it called again? I forget what it is now. Myelin. And it is actually a physical thing. The connections are physical. Dendrites from one neuron join with a dendrite from another. And then when if those pathways get used a lot, it's kind of like if you imagine a path through a field, if it gets walked on a lot, gradually the path becomes clearer and clearer. And it's easier to travel through it, even if there's long grass on the field, you can travel faster. And this stuff, myelin, is like a fatty kind of a deposit that actually grows around the connections. And then the signals that go from one neuron to another actually go quicker. And so that's how you develop a high level of skill at something very specific like this. So for me, the connections that I've got, my mental map is there, but the connections between the neurons are not as strong as they were when I was doing this kind of stuff an awful lot. So, if I practice this again, then I'll be rebuilding those connections. So which is why it's generally quicker to relearn something than it is to start completely from scratch. Synapses, yeah. Interesting, Marilyn, you should say that. But I bet when you were at Angel, I bet you got to a point where you could really nail things, right? And you will be able to build it back quickly, if you want to. And the reason for me personally, it's an important skill for anyone, but for me, it's particularly important. Anyone who works with direct painting, where you've got your subject there, you're working from life, or actually even from a photo, and you're doing it all at once. You're not doing a careful drawing first and then transferring it to a panel, or the kind of the classical approach. You have to be able to eyeball fairly well. I don't mind if I'm a few millimeters out in my paintings. If it's like an 8x10 painting, it's a few millimeters out, I don't mind. But I've been much worse out than that, much further out than that, and had to repaint stuff. And that's a pain because for direct painting, a lot of it is in the calligraphy and the brush marks. And if you go over the same bit too many times, you lose that pretty quickly. So the next thing we want is the furthest right point. Okay. And that's here. It's this end, this side of this garlic bulb. So if I visualize, actually there's slight banding on this from the printer, so I don't really need to visualize it, but visualize a vertical going from there to there. And by the way, did I say this? I may already have said this. If you're struggling at all with getting these right, actually draw the vertical on there, Don't be afraid to do that. It's all good learning. Anything that helps you get there is fine. So it wants to be like up here, and I want about that distance there. It's going to be vertical. It's going to be about there on that line. There's a reason the grid was white, so it will stand out when you make a mark on it. So same thing. I'm going to stand back. That looks almost exactly in the middle of that. Almost exactly halfway between here and here, but very slightly to the right. That's what it looks like to me. So I'm going to try and mark that. So same thing as before. Put my thumbnail right up against that. Move the end of the pencil over to the line. You can use a ruler, you can use a piece of thread, anything is fine. And then check the distance. Underestimated it slightly more. Again, it's I'm out by about 2 millimeters, so it's actually about there. If the distances are very small, I don't bother re-estimating it. I just go for it. Okay. The sound gone really quiet suddenly. Seems like it's gone quiet. Let me know if there's Let me know if there's a sound problem. I think it looks like I might have a problem. Sound is fine, is it? Oh, good. Looks like the level's dropped a bit. I'm not sure why. I'm going to bring it up just a little bit. But I did have this problem the other day. I'm not sure what it was. And when I brought it up, it suddenly started distorting, so I need to be a little bit careful. Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, it does look like it's dropped off a little. Just wondering why. Yeah, so this happened on a live stream the other day, and when I brought the sound up, then suddenly it started distorting. So I do need to be a little bit careful about bringing it up too far. It may just be that I've got a problem with one of my pieces of equipment, which is quite old and probably needs replacing. We'll see. We'll see. Let me know if I'm a bit too quiet and you can't hear me. Hopefully it's going to be okay. Fine. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So this has given us, we know a centimetre to the right beyond halfway. I don't know because I'm not. It is further to the right. It is definitely further to the right than halfway, Marilyn. Yeah. And it actually doesn't really matter if it's printed off differently, as long as you work from the reference you have. You know, I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. So work to whatever you know, whatever you have. I wouldn't say it's quite. For me, it's like maybe half a centimetre, something like that. Interesting. Have you printed it off? Did it come off 8 by 10 inches when you printed it out, David and Marilyn? Just let me know. Okay, so the next thing we want to know, so we know how far out this is going, okay, but we don't know where the edge is here. You know, we know it's around here somewhere. So this is, I would do this literally at this point, or you can just visualize the lines, but we need to find this point here. The point where the garlic bulb is actually the furthest away from this line, and we need to find this distance too, okay? So, you know, there's no reason why you shouldn't actually draw a vertical down, you know, and then you want to judge that distance. Yeah, I've never used those dividers, but I've heard great things about them. For this exercise, though, you don't want to use them straight away. Use them to check, and then you can use a ruler or you know, just your pencil or anything, or even your finger. 7.5 by 10. I wonder why that is. It definitely was set to print off at 8 by 10, so I don't know why that's happened. Apologies for that. 7.5 by 10. How strange. Maybe there's something wrong with my printer. In Photoshop, I definitely set it to print off at 8 by 10. So I'm not sure why that would be. So I would suggest that they're probably slightly distorted then. It's probably a little bit squished in, I would think. Ten and a little bit. Yeah, that's why the measurements are slightly out. 6 by 7. Oh well, I did my best. I did set it up in Photoshop so that it was supposed to print at 8 by 10. And it did on my printer, I'm not sure why. Anyway, so I need to judge this distance, okay? I've drawn that in. If I was doing this normally for a painting, I would imagine this line. And I would guess that without drawing that line in. But I'm making it explicit because this is the way that I think about how to find dots. It's like, you know, looking up. I would be looking for something else that it lined up with. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to judge that distance. I'm going to guess it at about there. I'm going to start going along a little bit quicker now, because hopefully you should have... yours is portrait. What? Well, as long as your drawing is the same size and your grid, you know, is the same as your oh, I'm glad someone's got 8 by 10, Yvonne. As long as yours is the same, as long as your drawing is the same size as what you're working from, it doesn't really matter, you know. Hopefully they're not like a hall of mirrors kind of distorted. So I'm going to check this distance here. And slightly, really close, but I slightly underdid it, so it's about 1 millimeter lower. You know, I mean, in real terms, in terms of actually doing a drawing or a painting, that millimeter wouldn't really make any difference, you know. And I want to mark this point here, so I want, like the very lowest point, I want to find out exactly where that is. Okay, so I would be wanting to imagine this distance here. If this was a horizontal going across there, imagine that. I'm going to guess it about there. And then check it. So I'm just making sure that this is level, you know, relatively level. It's all like, this is like heavy training for your ability to judge distances. That one is, again, I've underestimated slightly. Sorry, no, I've overestimated slightly, so it's slightly closer, so it's actually about there. So it looks like my tolerance at the moment is generally about, apart from one I got that was about 0.5 centimetre out, my tolerance at the moment is pretty much about 2 millimetres. My kind of room for error, which is not, you know, that's not the end of the world, that's not too bad. Okay? So yeah, my printer's very old. I don't know if that makes a difference at all, but mine's quite an older printer. So let me know. Just drop a comment in the chat. Let me know if you're ready to move on and you're keeping up okay. Because now we're on to the next stage, which is the envelope, which is what we did, very similar to what we did last month, sorry. Fuzzy-ended fingers. Oh no. Yeah, dividers are good. You know, I mean, a ruler is fine. You could get really exact with a ruler if you wanted to, you know. Okay, good. So I want to find this point. I would be wanting to find that point before I went any further. I'm really just looking around for bits of the drawing that, like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the dots, basically. And what I want is a rough shape of this whole thing. This is just like doing the basic approach that Jerome used in the bark plates, you know. But if I connect that one and that one, I'm going to have a line that cuts off a big part of it. And it would still work fine, but it's going to be better if I can find that point there. And I know that it's going to be slightly below this highest point here, so it's going to be very slightly below that. So it's going to be about there. So I just need to guess, in the same way as we did down here and here, that distance. We try and get that on the outside of the ellipse, that distance from there to there, basically. I'm going to draw it on just to make it clear what it is that I want that from there to there. Yeah, it's probably just, Michelle, it's probably just, I mean, that's definitely a skill you can develop. So I'm going to guess that it's estimated at about here. So I'm looking here to get the vertical, the height. And I'm guessing this distance from there to there, and I think it's going to be about there, so then I'll check it. And I've underestimated by about 2 millimeters, so it's actually about there. Let's put a little dot next to it so that I know which is the right one. Yeah, I imagine you do, Marilyn, yeah. I mean, I quite enjoy this kind of practice. I think part of what I enjoy about it is that I know I'm doing something useful, but there's no pressure. You know, it's not like I'm trying to produce a painting that I'm going to try and sell, or it's not like I'm, on a live stream where people are watching me paint. That can be quite a pressured thing. And this is just like, it's practice, it's just practice. So once you've got those points in, just pretty much with straight lines, and I use a fairly soft line, is just to join them. Now, a quick word on doing that. Don't do that. Don't hold this as if you're writing, you're drawing. So you hold it near the end, just like you would a brush. Get used to holding it like this, and it's going to really help you when you're actually, especially if you're doing direct painting, and you hold it lightly. It should be wobbly. You should be able to wobble it. And you want to put it where you want it to start. Like a line has to start somewhere, it has to end somewhere. It's going to start here, it's going to end there. And I personally find it really helps if you look at where you're headed rather than the end of the pencil as you're going along, and just make your line. I rest very lightly my hand as well. And then this one, doesn't matter what order you do them in though, of course. Now actually we probably want to go for here, thinking about it, that wants to be higher. Because this actually crosses, we want to, don't do that. We want to go to this one. I'm confusing myself a little bit there by putting too many dots in. I want to go from there to this one over here. And then from here to here, I'm going to do, the short ones are pretty easy. And then from here I'm going to go, you could add like the top of the garlic bulb there, but I'm just going to go right up to this one here. So I try, when I'm laying out, painting flowers or something, I try to imagine the shape of the envelope and where I want the whole thing to sit on the panel. And it really helps you with your placement, you know, deciding where you want things to go. So this is kind of like your, the way I approach these exercises, like this anyway, this is kind of like your foundation that you can build everything else from, you know. So if I visualize a line that goes from here down to here, and I can kind of visualize how much outside of that line these shapes are going to go, you know, and the same with this line here, you know, I can visualize kind of outside. The top of the garlic here is hits that line anyway, but like here, this bit of the garlic goes slightly outside of that straight line. So you've got a reference point, you've got something to work to, you know. So you really just want to refine it from here. So for me, the next thing I would be looking at from here, I think it's up to you really how you want to do it from here. But the next thing I would be looking for is this edge of this garlic. And I've got enough there that I know it's roughly the same vertical distance from the center as the other side. So I really just need to be looking at this distance here, you know. And I would guess it and put it in. It's just the edge that I want, you know. So we know at this point that those marks are right. And you could, I think if you are in an atelier situation, Circa and Marilyn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you started to refine this from here, you would either measure everything very carefully sight size with the thread or something like that, or you would still be checking. From this point in, I would eyeball the rest. Especially if the distances are small, you know. So it's fairly easy for me to see like where this point is. It's about here. You know, and everything, being as I've got a basic envelope in there, everything else that goes in there now is going to be reasonably accurate, but do it with straight lines like this. Just try to kind of judge where these things are going to go. Basic straight line Brocken. So you see that there, this line from there to there, it goes outside a tiny bit here. So you can show that, you know, it only goes outside a tiny bit. And the reason I like to do this bit completely by eye is because now we've judged distances, okay, and we've been really careful with that. So we've stretched our ability to judge a distance accurately. We've developed that a bit. Now I'm thinking about shape. I'm very practically minded, you know, and I want to develop skills that when I'm at the easel, they're going to help me, you know, when I'm actually painting. So I'm looking at this point here and it's, you know, almost up. It's well inside this line. It's not quite on that line, but it's almost as high. As the center line, as the center horizontal. So that's going to come up like that. And you, as I say, you could at this point, if you wanted to, like do this like by measuring each of these points, you know, guessing and then measuring. It would take a lot longer, obviously, to do the thing. But as I say, I'm looking to be able to do to stretch this ability of judging shape at the same time as judging distance, so that when I come to rough things out in a painting, it's going to go much more smoothly, and hopefully that I'll make less mistakes. Now I know that this point here is roughly on that line because I just checked it a minute ago. So I want the distance, you know, so it's going to be probably about here. And there, obviously, it goes above. And what we're going to do, you know, we just want to get these shapes in, basically, as very simplified shapes. And you can look quickly from one to the other. It's complicated by this version of the exercise is complicated by the fact that you've got a lot of values in there. It's not just a line subject that we're working from, and that makes it way harder. Yeah, bamboo skew is that's a good idea actually, I would think. So when you're standing further back, it's easier to see, and you can just, what they call the flick, you can just flick your eye from one to the other and see, you know, if there's anything you think is slightly out. Incidentally here, I'm looking for this line, not this one. I'm not bothered about extraneous stuff. I want the line of the shape. This needs to come out further. I can see that just looking at it. So I'm going to correct that a little bit. This should be more like that. I'll leave the corrections in so you can see where I've done them. So I want to find the bottom of the pot next. I've got the top of the pot, I want to find the bottom of the pot. And it's slightly above this here. Slightly above this mark that we put down for the furthest right part of the garlic. And this we can put in. We know that that's going to be about that far out, so this is going to go up there like that. See, this is from this point here, so it goes, it's slightly inside. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe it would be clearer if I show it with a ruler. From this point up to here. This is going slightly inside. And then it goes down away. And all of this are just guessing. So you're kind of, in a sense, after the careful measuring at the start, we're flying a little bit blind. But the reason that we do the careful measuring at the start is that so that we're relating what we're drawing to something that we know is accurate. Incidentally, I didn't really think about it. I think I put a comment in the threads group. I didn't really think about how closely related these shapes were when I put them together. So I'm interested in finding this height here, you know, because it's going to really help get that shape. And I think it's probably about here. All of this is just estimating. So I'm going to estimate this distance here from the middle, the vertical of the grid, out to this point here. Now I know I'm going to be out by a little bit, because, you know, so far I've seen from the points that I measured carefully at the start, I was roughly, my tolerance was out by, you know, like 2 millimeters each time. I think it's probably about here. And then from that point it carries on going up a little bit, but this bit comes out. So just try and judge the angles, and something someone said to me a long time ago, which kind of helps with angles, is you can think of them as the hands of a clock. I think almost certainly this is out here, so this needs to come down further, that needs to come down further, and because I'm looking at this angle here, and that angle was definitely wrong. I think that would be more like that. Yeah, drawing like this when you're when you don't have a solid foundation, it's much more difficult. And you get, after a while, if you do a lot of this, after a while you get so you can feel when something is out, even without measuring it. You know, my personal opinion is that there's an awful lot of, and what we like to think of as rational thought, a lot of that is, well, it's not opinion actually, it's based on psychology. A lot of it is based in feelings and emotions, and you can feel, you know, when something is out. So I'm looking at this, I got to guess where that is because it's in shadow, but I think it's probably about here. And it comes up to just outside. This little pot, by the way, is not symmetrical, having painted it a lot of times. And then just an idea of where the top is. This was our top outline for the top. Not going to bother with the ellipses or anything like that at the moment. And I'm not going to bother with this because it's a lost edge anyway. That's it. Drawing done. And if you stand back and look, you know, there should be some bits that you can see that are slightly out. I think mine isn't looking too bad, but I'm a bit concerned about the width of my stem here. So I think perhaps this distance is too small and this should be slightly wider, I think. I think I'm probably going to change that a little bit and bring that out a couple of millimeters out there. But it's difficult to judge because, you know, as I say, you're doing something. We're working from a flat reference, but it has value in it. It's a photograph, you know, it has a lot of different values. So this is like a halfway house between just copying a line drawing and working from life. All right. So the last stage is to stick some tracing paper over it. You want your check, your feedback check. Now, oh, by the way, I was going to tell you the tape I use for this. This is, it's Shur tape, S-H-U-R tape. You could get it from shurtape.com, and it's actually pH neutral tape. It's low tack, and I use it for sending paintings out. And it's, conservators use it. It's nice for this because it makes it easy to put things down and then lift them off again. So just going to do a quick tracing. The other thing, obviously, that we're practicing here is reducing form down, simplifying it down to straight lines, which really helps when especially if you're doing curves, to simplify them down like this. And if you have this like this, so it's taped at the top, or you can lift it, it's easy to check and see which bits you've missed. If there are any bits that you haven't actually. and that would be enough. If I was going to be doing a painting of this, that would be enough. But I would also be marking in where the light and the shadow is, but we're not dealing with values today, just with this. Okay, so then I can lift it off. Oh, I forgot something. Sorry, before you do that, put your grid on, mark these points, like the top here to the bottom, because this is going to give us, and the same here, from there over to here, because we line these points up, and then we'll make sure, that lets us make sure the tracing paper is exactly lined up with the drawing, with the reference, sorry. Place it over the reference. We can line up these points here, here, and here, and here. Assuming that my grid was reasonably well drawn out. Look at how many mistakes I've made. Really easy to see, you know. This is you can't kid yourself at this point. You know, it really shows you what you got right and what you got wrong, and how much practice you need to do to get to a point where you can really nail these. I mean, you can see I'm like ½ centimetre out. This distance here, when I just judged that, it should actually have been there. And that's thrown out everything. And I thought I needed to bring this further down in order to get that angle right, but it wasn't. I needed to bring that up, and that would have given me a better angle there. That was the problem. So my pot I've elongated my pot. The garlic, I had more reference points for the garlic, and the garlic's pretty much nailed. It's a little bit out there. I'm glad I changed the width there, because the width here looks like it's actually about right. But this is too low and should actually have been a little bit higher up there. This is all good because we had reference points for it. This here I was out by about 3 millimeters, should have been further out there. At least I got that line reasonably right. But a lot of my pot is out. Can you see it clearly enough? I hope that's, I'll draw my outline a bit more clearly so you can see, like, hopefully, I want it to be really obvious, you know, where I've made the mistakes. So, you know, I might be thinking to myself that I'm pretty good at eyeballing, but, you know, I made a major mistake on that pot, and that would show in a painting as being out, you know. I would be looking at it, probably having painted the light and the shadow and done a lot of checking of colours, and then realised that it was out. The garlic is good, the pot is really out. Just this bit is okay, and the top and that line are okay, but all of this, ½ centimetre out. Okay, just goes to show. Yeah, Heather, I did exactly the same. The garlic was all right, and the pot is too tall. Yeah, it's very like, I think anyway, this is very like trying to judge colour and trying to judge value. It's impossible unless you train it. You have to train the skill, you know, and also mixing colours accurately, it's the same. You have to train the skill. It's very, very difficult to get right if you don't. And a lot of what makes this so difficult is the fact that it's a full value reference. You know, it's not just a line drawing. If this was a line drawing that we were trying to copy accurately, it probably would be easier, you know. But it's much more difficult to judge distances when you've got value involved as well. There's all kinds of, you know, our perceptual systems, which is mostly our brains, thankfully, you know, it's nothing really to do with our eyes, it's our brains. They're just not set up for these tasks, so that's why we have to train them. So let me know how yours went. If you can stick your, take a photo and stick them in the Threads group and show us how you did, you know. Don't be proud about this stuff. I mean, I think a lot of this is, you need to be, I guess I learned this a long time ago, streaming live and painting live, is that I make some really big mistakes when I'm live. And it would be nice to think that I never did, but the reality is that I do. And I think you have to own those mistakes, because that's how you make progress, you know. And learning to be able to eyeball something and draw more accurately has a hidden depth and resonance to it beyond just being able to eyeball something, I think. It's almost like the only way the closest I can come to describing it is that your resolution of your perceptual system becomes finer. And that helps a lot of other things apart from just drawing accurately. So I think this is a really important exercise. It's one that I need to do a little bit more, obviously, because if I go back maybe 3 years, I could nail stuff like this. I once nailed a circle. So I know that I used to be better at this than I am now. So, you know, I need to build in a little bit of this into my practice routine, probably. The great leveler, the tracing paper, and you know, but this feedback, this is really, really important, especially if you're on your own at home and you don't have someone looking over your shoulder and saying that's about 1/8 of an inch out. You need to change that. This is really, really effective feedback, and the feedback element of practice is one of the most important. If you don't have a system of feedback, then it's very difficult to make progress, or at least your progress will be a lot slower than if you do have it. Yeah, Heather says it's more fun doing this together. It went numb doing it by myself. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that's part of the point of Threads anyway, is that we get to do this stuff together and share it. I think it makes a lot of difference doing it this way. Margaret, the pot was okay, but the garlic was out. Yeah, what I do with the incorrect points, I leave them in there, but I put a little dot to the side of the correct point so that I know which one was the right one. That's really easy to get wrong like that. Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you could be bothered to do something like this, like every day, you know, if you did something like this every day, after a month, you would be able to nail it, something like this. Absolutely nail it. It's surprising when you have a really effective way to practice something. It's surprising how, and you do it in a very focused way, surprising how quickly skill develops. A lot of the time, progress is very slow because we're doing, most painters, I know not everybody does, but most painters perform all the time and hope to get better through performance. This is practice, and this puts your progress really in a different lane. This is like, it puts skill development in the fast lane. So it's very focused, and you're just developing like one or two skills at a time, not the whole thing. And you have a feedback mechanism, you know. And then if you do it regularly, you get really good. It's surprising how good you can get at this stuff. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why. Mariana, you were saying the first lines you drew that weren't connected to the drawing were confusing. Do you mean the points? Or do you mean when we joined up the points? Those are kind of, they're a visual reference. So, you know, I will be imagining a diagonal across here and trying to imagine how much further outside these shapes go out from outside of that diagonal, you know. And knowing, for instance, that this, the top of the garlic roughly crosses this line here, knowing that this goes slightly outside the line. That's what those lines are for, you know, to give you something, a reference, you know. Oh, Barbara, you shouldn't need a password at all for the chat. Usually if you go into those three little bars at the bottom, there should be an option to set your name without actually logging into Chatango. I'm getting a bit sick of Chatango. It's a mess on setting these chats up, and I think there's probably going to be a better way to do it. So don't stress about that too much, because I'm going to look for another way to do it soon, which hopefully is going to work better. It's just a little bit clunky and a little bit like old school, and I think it needs updating. So we'll find something else. The envelope, Mariana, yeah, that's right, yeah. I mean, by all means, try it without the envelope and see if you find it works better for you that way. As I say, these lines are really just there to give you like a reference, something to judge against. You know, if you can visualize it over the subject, it can help you to decide where you want to place that within. Like if you're laying out a painting, you know roughly where that shape is going to be, and you can how big that shape is, and you can decide where you want to place it. All of this is about visualizing, being able to visualize stuff reasonably accurately, which after all is what, you know, eyeballing a drawing is. You need to be able to visualize it visualize distances and then mark them, visualize shape and then draw them, you know. That's really what we're practicing is the skill of visualizing, which is probably one of the most important skills for a realist artist to have, which is perhaps why exercises like this develop more than just your ability to eyeball a drawing. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, for the next one, for the next workshop, which is going to be a value one again, I will endeavour to find a different kind of chat. It's in a couple of weeks. The 19th, I think it is, something like that. So maybe I'll look for a different way to do the chat then, and we'll see. Okay, well, thanks for coming, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. It sounded like you did. But do remember that it's not a one-shot deal. What I'm showing you here is an exercise. If you want to develop this skill and all the good stuff that comes along with it, you need to do it regularly. Not necessarily every day, but say 2-3 times a week, you know, and then you will find that you'll start to get a lot better at this stuff when you're just looking at something and trying to visualize it and do it. Next month, we're going to do this from life. Okay, all right, see you all again soon. Bye for now.